Good morning and welcome to Hit and Hustle from IrishSportsDaily.com. I'm your host, Greg Flammang, and with me, as always, is Jamie Uyeyama, Jamie University. We've got a good show coming for you today. We are going to talk about the Notre Dame schedule reveal that came out yesterday. We are not going to talk about the video that Notre Dame accompanied with the schedule reveal because I didn't like it and it wasn't a good time. And I don't know what that was, Jamie. I don't. It was not the best thing that I've ever seen, but you know what? That's okay.
Hey, whatever. You know what? I like that they do something different. Whatever. They can't all be hits.
They can't all be hits, and that's my takeaway. You know, sometimes you take a shot, you don't hit it, and that's fine, right? That's you got to take your shot, just like Sam Hartman's going to take a lot of shots deep for Notre Dame in 2023, and that's what we're all excited about. So you know what? You got to feel it out the off season. You just got to you got to feel the lay of the land, take some chances with some digital stuff. If it doesn't work, throw it away, do another one. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in. If this is your first time catching the show, hit the like button, hit subscribe button. Everyone says smash it. Maybe you should smash it. Smash the like.
Good.
Smash the notification bell. Yeah. Smash the subscribe button. Get the show out to more people.
Smash everyone, it, gently tap, whatever.
Yeah, whatever you got to do, man. Whatever you do, it's all free. That's the best part about it. It's all free to do. Chris is the first one in the show. He says first. He says good morning to everybody. S. Gomez, always with the LFG. Good morning. Here's the thing, S. Gomez. I can't say the LFG because that'll trigger the algorithms in the YouTubes and stuff, and then we'll get in trouble. They'll put like a rating on the show that. And then people can't see it, right? So that's why I can't say it, but I appreciate the fire that you always bring. Let's see. CFB Hertz. Good news, everyone. We've officially ticked under 200 days until kickoff in Ireland. It's just around the corner. Just around the corner. You know, we're almost halfway there. It's great. Tyler Borgman says, a great day to have a great day. Go Irish. Absolutely. Nathan Urbach says, I don't want to break my laptop. Doesn't want to break his laptop. So
exactly. Just tap it.
Yeah. You know what? Rajon, caress the like button. I love it. I love it. Be sensual with the like button. And the subscribe and all those things. Matt's in chat. And I don't appreciate it. I don't think this is necessary. You know, with his 2-day and you're lucky it was Tyler Huntley. That's all I'm going to say.
2-day, probably the Bills.
That's right. Lamar would have run for $300 if he was in that game, and that's fine. But you know what? I guess to the victor goes the spoils. All right, here we go. Let's talk about the schedule, Jamie. First of all, let's throw it up. The schedule's out. I guess before we get into the nitty gritty, and we'll go down game by game. But do you have any just 10,000 foot view takeaways, big picture takeaways from the Notre Dame schedule that was just released?
I love the first month of the season. I think to me, like, I mean, obviously you probably don't if you're just looking at it from you don't want to go to Ireland in terms of like what that means and all the logistics. I mean, of course, the players want to go. People want to go. It'll be an experience. They'll have fun, whatever. Yeah. Excuse me. But I think playing, I mentioned at 6 o'clock, playing 3, group of 5 / FCS teams out of your first 4 games. Notre Dame never does that.
Right.
Notre Dame never does that. And I think that's been one of the things, I know that's been an old Mike Frank complaint for a long, long time, is that they make the beginning of the schedule, and part of that is being an independent, but they make the beginning of the schedule way too tough. Like they're always playing Ohio State the first week, or Georgia week 2, or Michigan the first week, or whoever, right? Like they're always have something set up where it's typically one of those big games of September. And although that's good for the fans, like I get it, those are games to get into, and maybe this might not get people into the season as much. It's tough to get excited. No one really ever gets excited about Navy. No one's going to get excited about Tennessee State. NC State, like, it's not like people are going to be like, doing cartwheels to like, oh, that's a good place to go to visit or whatever. And I mean, Central Michigan, yeah, obviously, there's a lot of ways to look at, like, the season doesn't start for people with interest until Ohio State. But that's a good thing, because now Notre Dame gets a chance to kind of figure things out.
Yeah.
Before. And not to say they can't. Obviously, you can't come in and sleepwalk through these games. I mean, Marshall's a perfect example of that. You can't do it, right? But you can at least, like, hopefully you learn lessons from Marshall last year. Also, I don't think any of these, like a Navy or Central Michigan or even NC State is going to have a defense like Marshall. So I think they're going to have a chance to kind of like have their identity, figure out the roster, figure out things with Hartman, with Buckner, or whatever. Like, they're going to figure that all out and then play Ohio State at home. Like, I think that's a good setup. Like, obviously you want, a bye to be kind of like mixed in a little bit earlier, and where the location of buys I know we'll get into, but I like how it sets up the first month. I think it's a good setup.
Right. And last year, right, there was so much emphasis put on the Ohio State game because, it's the opener and it's Marcus Freeman, going back to his alma mater and everything. And that was a whole big to do. Right. And I think that coming off of that game, that kind of sets up the Marshall, the Marshall letdown. Right. And I think, was it a letdown game? Was it a trap game, or whatever you want to call it? It wouldn't have got if Notre Dame opened with Marshall, I think it would have been seen in a different kind of way. Maybe the game goes different, right? To be honest, like I really don't like going to Dublin, and this has nothing to do with like this specific schedule. You're going to Dublin, right? It's best to do it in the opener for sure, obviously. But I don't like doing that. Like, people have been asking me, like, are you going to try to go to that game? Like, I don't have a desire to go, right? Like, I don't like literally zero interest, because I mean, for me, there's this whole bunch of like kid stuff, and that soccer will be up then. And it's just like, there's a lot of moving parts, but like, I'm just not excited to go somewhere and watch Notre Dame. I want them, in Notre Dame Stadium, or I want them in Baltimore, whatever, right? Like, that's what I would prefer, just personally. There's so many moving parts to that trip, and it's almost like it does kind of set up like it's an unneeded, I don't want to say distraction, but like so many more moving parts. Like, you're going international, right? I just don't love that, right? You don't need it's not something that Notre Dame needs to build a brand, in my opinion. That's how I look at it. I don't have like a huge strong reaction about it. I don't like big strong feelings. It is what it is. But just, if someone has asked me and we're talking about it now, I would say I don't love that. But to your point, like, I do like that Notre Dame has a long runway before they get into games where it's like, okay, we really need to focus on this, right? Like, it's human nature to say like, hey, we're playing a team that if we play our best game could still beat us. And there's a different kind of energy to that kind of preparation and that kind of lead up and all those things, right? And that's just, like I said, human nature. That's just the way it goes. And here's the other thing too. Like, at NC State, right? I think last year we would have looked at a game like this, be like, hey, Notre Dame could lose this game, right? Like, we got to be careful with this. I think, generally speaking, like at NC State, at Louisville, at Duke, although Duke's probably going to be pretty good because Elko's a really good coach, but like, Pitt, Wake Forest, Stanford, like, when you bring in Sam Hartman, I just have a totally different feeling about games like that. It's like, I just don't view them as like, man, Notre Dame's got to be careful, right? It's like a game I go into. It's like, look, Notre Dame's going to have 35 points, and can those teams reach that point? And I don't know that they can. So that's how I feel about it. Do you have an opinion on, that kind of thought process there, Jamie?
Well, I just don't think any. I mean, that helps that you have a veteran quarterback. That's certainly something
Yeah.
that it is not insignificant. I just don't think any of those games are. I mean, at Clemson is the one game um, that where you look at and you're like, oh, Hartman, that will help because he's
Yeah.
been in a million of those kind of games. Like so, in that sense, yeah. But none of those other places are like, man, like, oh man, that Duke crowd's going to be wild. No, it's not going to be like, and they might be pretty good, but like, it's not going to be. It's not going to be wild in any of those places. Like it's any kind of thing. Like they just don't have like even that NC State game is not going to be like a night game. Like I sincerely doubt it. Like that. So it's not going to be a game where it could be like a big deal for NC State fans, like Notre Dame's coming, but it's not going to be like they're not going to have a team that it's going to be set off. So I always look at the road games first too, and where that is, and like Stanford, and so like how it kind of sets up. And really, the only game where you're like, oh, this is going to be like a toss up, and this is going to be a really tough game is Clemson out of the road games. So that always helps because the fact that you get USC at home this year, you get Ohio State at home, that's big. That's really big, right? Because like I mean, I want to see Caleb Williams obviously is a great player, but like it's a different thing when you're on the road and it's cold and it's all these other pieces that are a part of it, right? So I think like how it kind of sets up from that perspective, I think it's a pretty friendly schedule. Like overall, right? Overall, like obviously there's going to be some challenges over the course of the season, but the home and away stuff this year, and I think like the travel stuff this year isn't like brutal.
Yeah.
I mean, aside from going to Dublin.
Right. I mean, that is what it is. Like I said, it's
but even that though, like compare that to 2012, and obviously they came back and they still won the game. But I think there was like a real hangover from that. Not a literal hangover, although maybe, who knows, maybe they're having a lot of Guinness when they were over there. But they came back and played Purdue, and it was not a good performance from that team, right? And they needed Tommy Rees to bail them out at the end. And I think like that would have been way worse if that was the NC State game. That would have been bad. I would have been like, that is, like a trap game, right?
Well, that's like you got Brennan Armstrong coming in, it's just like a different kind of thing.
All these other different pieces of it too. That I think that would matter. But Tennessee State, like that's the kind of team you want to be able to play after that week. If you don't have a bye after that, that's what you want.
Right. So Navy, they open and they have a new coaching staff. So Ken Niumatalolo is out, and Brian Newberry, the defensive coordinator, is the head coach now. I believe I don't remember the man's name, but he brought in someone who I believe is an option. Like they're going to be running the same kind of offense. But I do think for his first game, I think there will probably be. And look, I think Navy in the first game is always a little bit. They're just not gelling yet, right? Like later in the year, it's always like I feel when Notre Dame plays Navy, either in the middle of the year or end of the year, it's always like, oh, Navy, this is like a terrible Navy team when you see them in the beginning, and then they
they're a program that typically gets better as the season goes on.
Right, and so I kind of see that being the same kind of thing. I think it'll be very difficult for Navy when, and this will be the case for I think a lot of the teams on the front end where Notre Dame's got the same offensive coordinator in Tommy Rees, obviously, but what are they going to look like with Sam Hartman at quarterback, right? Like that's going to be they're not really sure. Are they going to run a different type of offense? Do they have any of the same tendencies that they had last year or even the year before, right? I imagine a lot of the tendencies will be totally different. So there's going to be an adjustment period for them. If Navy wants to go zero blitz against Sam Hartman on every snap,
I think they'll get killed if they do.
I welcome it. I think that would be great.
They did it out of desperation, and then Notre Dame just blew it. Like that was
right. So I don't see that being a big thing. I feel pretty confident going into that game. Tennessee State, obviously, we feel good. Craig D makes a good point about like to play Navy early and get back to a conventional defense. Like I think that's
you get settled in the whole year
and
playing
that's
your defense.
and Tennessee State allows you to have that adjustment period, right?
And in saying that, I haven't looked at Tennessee State's offense at all. So who knows if they run like a totally wild system
it's
that
true,
is
right?
like it
Although
could
it's Eddie
be
George, like it makes you feel like Eddie George isn't gonna be all crazy.
I mean, I feel like he almost needs to run a like I formation, like just because it's Eddie George, but he probably doesn't. But but I'll be interesting actually when I start looking into Tennessee State of like what they do run and all that, and like kind of what their talent is like. But yeah, no, I agree with Craig there. Like I think that is helpful. It's helpful because especially when you're inserting it in just the middle of the season, it ruins the flow. It does.
Right.
It ruins the practice flow. It ruins everything. And then the other thing is too, is like how Brian Kelly always used to be like, okay, well, we have to have like 10 minutes a day where we're still just doing like Navy prep because we want to make sure that we're ready for it. And it's like, well, then you don't have to do it the rest of the season. You're like, God, thank God we don't have to work on that or whatever. And you get to spend, you know, a good, I mean, you're gonna have to spend a good portion of camp, you know, preparing for it or whatever. Those will be obviously the periods they're like, hey, don't write about this if they let us in or whatever. But like it's something that I think just to get it out of the way, I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, I think those are good points made by you and Craig. All right, at NC State. Brennan Armstrong coming in, and I think in 2021 would have been very, very concerned about this game. We were very concerned about Virginia in 2021, especially without Kyle Hamilton, but then Brennan Armstrong got hurt, and so that kind of went away. And then last year, Brennan Armstrong was like awful. I mean, it was like
he was bad,
really bad. I can't remember a player who was really good taking that steep of a drop. I mean, can you think of anyone who was just like, yeah, this guy was putting up big numbers, and then the next year he's just like, it's just completely different, like 180.
I can't off the top of my head. I can't. I'm sure there's been somebody before, but like he really just. I mean, if he would have entered the portal a year ago, he would have been like considered one of the top guys,
like Sam Hartman.
He would exactly been Sam Hartman. He would have been like that.
We'd have been doing cartwheels over it.
Yeah, and I think. I mean, the one thing is that so they hired Robert Nanai, who's the offensive coordinator, right? Who was his offensive coordinator at Virginia. He was the offensive coordinator at Syracuse, and you know they certainly were way better on offense this year under him, and you know they were good. I mean, the one thing I don't know, and which I will. This is the one thing we're talking about in general terms because we haven't like done deep dives on all these teams, but NC State, like, what's their receiver position like? Because that was the one thing with that really good Virginia team. They were like 4 deep across. They had really good players, right? And I have no idea what NC State's, receiver position is like. I know that this last year too was like the 2022 season was the year that people were overrating NC State. Oh, this always happens, right? Where someone's like, they're bringing back like 80% of their production and they're going to be
tier one.
Yeah. Right. And then all of a sudden they're like, they're my pick to win the ACC. It's like, I mean, they don't have enough talent, guys. I'm sorry. They have enough. This is what happens. I don't know how much they're actually bringing back. My guess is that they're probably losing more than they were a year ago. But the one thing is they know how to recruit and develop guys on defense. I bet they'll probably bring a pretty good defense to the table. I mean, that won't be an easy game. I don't imagine, but I will be really interested to see what Brendan Armstrong looks like early. That'll be interesting.
Yeah. So yeah, they could, I mean, obviously they can, scare Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame has to, it's one of those games like you have to play well. You go in there and play bad, then you could have a problem. But Notre Dame goes in and plays well. You got to feel good about that. And the same thing for Central Michigan. We'll go deeper into these teams, but it's just part of that. Like Central Michigan is the last game of the ramp up before you get into a team like Ohio State, right? And so Ohio State's obviously losing CJ Stroud. which is obviously a huge loss for them. I assume Kyle McCord will be the quarterback next year. It's him or Devin Brown, I think, are going to kind of battle it out.
Yeah, they didn't take anybody in the portal. So
they didn't take anyone in the portal. Do you have any sort of, opinion on either of those guys? Or is it just one of those got to wait and see?
I think you got to wait and see. I certainly liked McCord as a recruit. I thought he was a really good prospect. But,
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, it's with quarterback, it's always such a crapshoot of like, what has this guy been doing during that time? Where I will say there was more buzz with CJ Stroud, like heading into like after Fields left, where it was like Stroud. They were like, oh yeah, Stroud is going to be something like, and I haven't quite heard that about McCord. So, I don't know. We'll see. And then also too, Brian Hartline is the OC now, so it's a new play caller. He's gonna be kind of getting his feet wet, and he might be phenomenal. He might struggle. Obviously he's gonna have Ryan Day there, so I'm sure they'll be fine. They're loaded at receiver. They're losing some guys up front. That's I think not insignificant. And I will say the defense I think is going to be nasty because they bring a lot of guys back that are really good, and that'll be interesting. There, that's going to be. I would say just on paper, just the team. Forget about home, away, neutral, whatever. That's going to be Notre Dame's toughest game, Ohio State, in my opinion.
Eric Ward asks, "Is the OSU game going to be at night?" That is the lock of the century.
Yes,
there is 0% chance. Ohio State and USC are going to be at night. Bet your mortgage on it. There's just no way they're not. And that's going to be determined before the year. So it's not like, with ESPN sometimes
should be a couple of huge recruiting weekends too.
Yeah. So those are going to be huge, huge games. And that's I think the Ohio State game, that's big. Ohio State fans like taking over the stadium potential. Unfortunately, it's close. When was the last time they were at Notre Dame? 96.
Yeah.
It's been a long time since Ohio State's come to South Bend. So there's a ton of fans who maybe haven't been in, 3 decades. So that has big take over the stadium potential. And unfortunately they're a red team, and so anytime there's a red, there's red in the stadium all the time. And I don't see how Notre Dame, like, we're talking about it now. I don't see how Notre Dame even avoids it, to be honest with you.
I think the one thing where I could see it not happening as much as like people would think is that those first 2 games for Notre Dame at home are kind of duds in terms of interest. Like, people aren't going to go out of their way to make trips up to watch Tennessee State and Central Michigan.
Yeah.
And Ohio State is a game where obviously the people who are going in the lottery just to sell their tickets are going to sell it, but there's going to be a lot of people who are like, nah, I'm holding on to this one. I think that's going to be, something that's real, or like people really trying to like make that trip to be there for that game. So, they'll have a lot of fans there. Wouldn't bet the house that it's going to be a total takeover though.
What was I guess, Nebraska was pretty bad. That's 2000.
Georgia.
Would you say Georgia was worse than Cincinnati? I feel like Georgia was worse. I feel like Cincinnati was like
Cincinnati
much in the corner.
Bad because this is why Cincinnati is bad. Because first of all, Notre Dame fans do not care about Cincinnati at all. So
right.
Who cares? Even though it was like the biggest game that year, people were like, who cares? It's Cincinnati.
In the preseason, it didn't have the juice. Like Ohio State will have the juice.
But for Cincinnati, that was like the biggest game in their program's history.
Yeah.
Right. So that's like, so that's like a different vibe there. For Ohio State, they just have such a large fan base that it's going to be a big game no matter what. They can go and take over a stadium. I I don't know. Like, I just kind of think that, like, it's the lack of those marquee home games for Notre Dame, and the fact that that is the first big one that makes me think that maybe Notre Dame fans will have a better showing than you expect.
I mean, the atmosphere, regardless, will be
it's going to be lit,
electric. It'll be great. So that'll be a good time. All right, on to September 30th at Duke. And they're coming off a 9-4 season too. Mike Elko, man, who
huge turnaround, man. Got to give him credit.
We love him as a DC for sure. But I was curious, like, is he going to? How is it going to work as the head guy, right? And that's like a totally different. It's a totally different thing than Marcus Freeman even came into, right? Now, obviously, they didn't have like USC on the schedule. They didn't have Ohio State on the schedule, right? So there weren't those built-in losses. But then again, you're Duke, right? They were terrible last year or the year before he showed up, and so like you have a ton of kind of built-in
and
losses
bad for
regardless.
many years too, really.
Right?
Like the end of the Cutcliffe era was bad.
You don't need to be playing Ohio State to have a built-in loss on your schedule, So that's a little different too. And he goes to 9-4, playing really good football. And I think for him too, I think this will be seen as. I imagine Mike Elko has it in his mind, like, I'd like to be Notre Dame's head coach one day, and so this is
certainly, yeah. He's. I don't think he's going to. If he keeps winning 9 games at Duke, he's not going to stay at Duke.
Yeah, so it's a trap game, letdown game coming after Ohio State. Whatever happens in the game for Notre Dame, that one is one where it's like my antennas are up. And
that'll be also interesting too, because I could see it being like a weird like noon kick type of game, because you never know how that's going to be viewed by because that's going to be on an ESPN /ABC channel. Right. So how that is going to set up. So I mean, I don't know. Could be ACC network, whatever.
Here's the thing though, if it's a noon kick, then maybe Duke's not that good. Like if Duke is let's say Notre Dame,
they make that the noon kick to be like, this is the ABC noon kick and we want it national. So it depends, right?
Yeah. I would think just generally. I mean, it also depends who else is playing that weekend and everything.
Duke is like whatever, they'll take whatever they can get. They're not on TV a lot.
Yeah. As long as it's national, I assume. Like anything to get off probably ACC network will probably be great for them. So that's a good point. And there's like a ton of factors too, but he's a really good defensive coach. He could really come up with a plan against Notre Dame. I don't know what their quarterback situation is. I know they had a transfer last year.
Who was good,
right? And that's, propelled them to, 9-4. So that's difficult. So, they're coming off.
Yeah, this definitely State. Could be a sneaky tough game.
Then you go to Louisville, who has Jeff Brom now is the new head coach. Who did they pick up? They picked up a quarterback in the portal, right?
Did they?
Or they have I mean, I know Malik Cunningham is out, right?
Yeah. Okay, now I gotta look it up.
I mean, either way, Jeff Brom's an offensive guy.
He
is. He's going to put together a pretty good offense, right? I think some of his offenses were a little bit overrated at Purdue.
This is what I think about Jeff Brom. I think he is definitely a good coach, right? Like he's definitely not a bad coach. Like he got the Louisville job for a reason. One of the things, I forgot they picked up Kevin Coleman Jr., the kid who went to Jackson State, who was like a high recruit who could have went into a bunch of different, places that he wanted to. Oh, they added Jack Plummer from.
That's right. Yeah. He was old Purdue. He was.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
I knew they added somebody.
They added him.
That actually makes me feel a lot better.
If he's Jack the Plummer quarterback, Notre Dame by 3 touchdowns. He's just not good. He's not good.
He lost his job to Aiden O'Connell.
He's just fine, But the other thing is this, and this is why, I mean, personally, as why I don't think um I don't think Purdue is set up to beat a Notre Dame type of team without having um, a Rondale Moore just lights out kind of game like he had against Ohio State that one year. They throw like 70% of the time. They are an extremely one-dimensional team, and that's just that's his offense, and that's fine. And I just think teams that are one-dimensional, especially when that one-dimensional is pass, and if Al Golden's still the defensive coordinator, and I think they did a really good job against the pass last year, and I think Notre Dame is going to be very good against the pass again. I just don't see that. Like, I don't see them as that matching up very well against Notre Dame. I mean, we'll see. And I don't know. I think Louisville to me was like very up and down last year. Like, I'll be interested to kind of see how they start. I think Braum will eventually kind of get them to be like fit nicely in that second tier in the ACC. But I mean, if you're gonna play at Louisville, which I think that 2019 game was kind of like, I mean, it was a Labor Day game. It was a bit more of a atmosphere than maybe some people would have expected. It was like a decent atmosphere, right? But I mean, I don't know. Like, I don't see them being set up to beat Notre Dame this year. That's if you're gonna have, I like that being one of the road games is what I would say.
Yeah, that's a good point. Rajon also brings up a good point. Jack Plummer would be a loser to Notre Dame at 3 different schools.
Let's break that record.
That'd be awesome. That's COVID gave us a lot of bad things, but that would be
the portal. I mean, people hate the portal. All these people hate the portal. I mean, why wouldn't you love the portal because of that? This guy could lose to Notre Dame 3 times at 3 different schools.
There it is, right there. That's modern college football. All right, and then on to the USC Trojans on October 14th. Jamie, it's that's another one going to be at night. Going to be a huge one, I imagine. USC's schedule is very easy leading up to this game, and then it gets very difficult. So they're probably going to be undefeated. Probably going to be defeated, top 5, probably around there somewhere, just due to others losing and that sort of thing. And then I guess I'll get to this question from Rajon too, because it's kind of topical to the thing. Are Duke and Louisville tougher sandwich between OSU and USC?
No. I think those are just, I mean, that's just, you just know once you get to Ohio State, you're in the heart of the schedule.
Yeah.
And there's no easy games really from that point on. So I don't really think it's like one of those things where, I mean, maybe early on, you're kind of like saving some stuff for Ohio State. But then I think after from Ohio State on, you're not saving anything. Like, you're just like, this is, like, I mean, because right after you play USC, you're playing like Clemson, and even like playing Pitt at home, like you just know how Pitt plays Notre Dame and like whatever. And we'll get into that game later, but just it's just they're all going to be tough. They're all going to be tough from that point.
Yeah. I think Duke is tougher. I think Duke is tougher after Ohio State. I think Louisville is actually easier in a way because I don't think Notre Dame would look past Louisville, but I think that it's like you get to go into Louisville feeling like, okay, we're going to focus on this game. It's almost like it would be so locked. You would be so locked in to go on the road to the fact that it would be so cliche for us to overlook this team that we're clued in to not do it. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
That works. Kind of the idea that you would overlook a game going into a big game, I think is so pervasive that it works the other way. So Rajon, I think it does help. I think if it was Louisville at home, I think there would be a little bit there, but since it's on the road, I think it
There's
takes
a
it
different
away.
focus.
Yeah. I think it's totally different. So it's
The
a
other
good
thing, I
question,
know
man.
no one has mentioned it yet, and I'll just mention it now because I'm sure other people are thinking about how the ACC always sets up those bye weeks. It literally doesn't matter. Notre Dame has won 28 straight against ACC teams in the regular season. 28 freaking straight. They set these guys up for these bye weeks, and you think, oh man, they're really like everything's against Notre Dame. Well, it's not helping. I mean, I wrote about it in Six Thoughts. Matt reminded me to mention it during this too. It's not helping them. And then also, Douglas Farmer tweeted this out too this morning that I think is, pretty pertinent to this. 33-35. That's Power 5 teams coming off an Ida week last season, and then facing a Power 5 team went 33-35. Last 3 seasons, it's 113 and 141. So how much of an advantage is it? It's not. I mean, yeah, sure, you can get some guys healthy or whatever, but I think in college football, especially, it's not like the coaches are like, well, now we got all this extra time to spend on this. No, they're recruiting during that time. They're like, it's not like you're totally focused on the next opponent right away. There's a lot that you have to do in between because you have to do it during your bye week because you're like playing catch up with all this too. So it's one of these things. I think that, Notre Dame does get screwed with in terms of the rest compared to a lot of other programs especially because of their independence and their scenario. And the Pac-12 will set it up that USC will get a break before Notre Dame or whatever. That happens all the time. But it doesn't have that big of an impact. The numbers say it doesn't.
Yeah. I think it's clear that there's, it's not a huge detriment at all. I do think it's funny that they're doing it though, because they're clearly doing it on purpose. I mean, the numbers are so much so that they are definitely giving them a bye. And I think they're only doing that because the ACC coaches want it. The problem for them is Notre Dame is better than them.
They're just better than them. And okay, so here's another thing. Okay, so CFP Hurt says it's not all that true. It definitely is.
Notre Dame's played something like 30 games since 2019 on the by disadvantage. They're doing.
And last year, Clemson they had a bye before, right? Because they played Syracuse, had a bye, and then played Notre Dame. So that was and that was seen as, remember, if people recall, that was one of those things where, they're going to get Cade Klubnik ready. They're going to, everything's going to go. And, boy, was he ever ready. Came in and threw that pick right away. Yeah. It obviously it didn't help them. If they had a chance to pivot, it's you can only change your team or change what you're doing so much during a bye week. It's overrated. The better team is going to win most of the time.
And this is why one of my takes about this schedule is a lot of people notice that the buys come after USC and after Clemson. I like it. I think that is the right way to do it. There's so much focus and energy going to be given to those games, then have the bye be afterwards and let yourself come down or, come down from a high or come down from a low and get an extra week and then see the other 2 games. So then it's you can put extra focus on Pitt. To me, it's better to put extra focus on Pitt than it is to put extra focus on USC, because you don't need the extra focus on USC. You don't need the extra focus going to Clemson. It's play Clemson. You're going to get a performance in that game. Put the extra focus on Wake Forest, where, Notre Dame could be, at that point, they could be 9-1 or something. And it's hey, we got to make sure we look good, going into the final weeks of the season, or 10-1 or whatever it would be, because it would be 9-1, because it's we're fighting for a playoff spot or something, or we're fighting to, we're 10-0 and we're fighting to hang on to our playoff spot, right? Put the focus on the games where it's you could have a letdown. You don't want something dumb to ruin, what you have this year. You don't like the players don't need, and I don't think the staff needs extra time to get ready for the big games like Ohio State, USC, and Clemson. You don't need that. Like they're going to have so much buy-in mentally from the players. It's better to have an extra time to buy into the Pitts and to buy into the Wake Forest and Stanfords, right? Like Notre Dame's ended the year on a poor note before. So put the focus on those games, at kind of the back end of the year that, you're fighting injuries and you're fighting bumps and bruises at that point. Like that's my take. What do you think?
I don't even say it's focused, but I think it's what you said with the injuries and stuff, because I think after, especially after games like USC and Clemson, those are games that they do mean more, right? So that means like if, your rotations and stuff are going to be like the guys that are in the rotation on the defensive line, linebacker, DB, whatever, the starters are going to play more in those games, right? Because you need to have your top guys out more. So when it comes to that kind of thing, there's going to be, more plays, more chances for injuries, more guys like maybe pulling stuff. You see it in those games all the time. That's why there's always guys who like cramp up, in those kind of games, whatever. There's probably going to need to be more recovery after those kind of games. So I think that in that way kind of makes sense a lot. And one other thing I was thinking about before I kind of forget about it, and this is kind of like going back to the beginning of the season, but the other reason why it's good to have those first 4 games kind of way it's set up is if you're thinking about like, we might lose a guy who doesn't want to get in, like, his 4 games and out.
That's a good point. That's
right?
A good point.
Now,
yeah.
First of all, if you don't play in any of those first 4 games and you want to get out, I think it's more than fair, because you should have opportunities in those games for everyone to play in at least a couple of those games, right? I would think. And if you're not getting that, that's probably not a good sign. But like, I think that is an opportunity, especially when you're finding out who's going to be the guys you count on, who are all these things. So those guys are probably going to get a chance to play. And I think, the big game is before. So people are going to just like opt out of the season and get it. Right,
I was going to say,
Ohio
like,
State.
would Jacob Lacey have opted out pre Ohio
I don't
State
think so.
in this
I don't think
situation?
so. I don't think he would have. And I think he would have played a lot more. So that's just how the kind of season would have worked out. I mean, maybe that's not the best for the players, because maybe some of these guys deserve a chance.
Maybe it is best for the players,
but it might be. I think
yeah.
Jacob Lacey really maybe he'll get the 2 years at Oklahoma and that'll really benefit him and whatever. I hope. I'm rooting for him. Really, right? But maybe he would have just really benefited from, because he would have played a ton at the end of the year, because it worked out, because obviously Cross got hurt.
What do we always say? If you hang in there, your chance will come.
Yeah. And I get why he left, whatever, right? He's frustrated.
You can't predict it. You know, right.
Totally. But at the same time, I think he would have benefited. So I think that might actually work out for Notre Dame. Sorry to kind of like go on a tangent there, but I just popped in my head as I was looking at that. Yeah,
that was a really good point. I didn't even think of that. So that's really good. Rajon is bringing up midterms. I think they will be during the bye week, between USC and Pitt. I think that's usually how it works. Yeah, I think that's usually how it works. So Pitt, the fighting Narduzzi's and the fighting Dracovics. The pettiness bowl.
Phil, yeah.
It'll be the biggest. Honestly, like the pettiness bowl will be great, and I think Notre Dame was petty too, and not putting Pitt on senior day. They could have. They absolutely
really should have.
And I think they were like, you know what, Phil obviously wants to have a senior day at Notre Dame, and that's not going to happen. You're not going to do that. You're going to do something different. So, and I honestly think that's what happened. So, that's what the situation is. Look, it's Pitt, and when you have the animus that program has towards Notre Dame, like obviously that game's going to be there could be some hijinks, shenanigans in that game, and I don't mean like dirty shenanigans. I mean just like it could be a frustrating game, right? I think Pitt often is. So that's kind of how I look at it. I would not predict Notre Dame to lose, just because I wouldn't. I think Notre Dame's better. And so, and it's January 19th. I'm going to pick Notre Dame to lose to Pitt on January 19th without more information. So that's how I feel about that. Notre Dame goes to Clemson the next week. And Clemson's going to be different, right? This is not your grandfather's Clemson. This is they brought in Garrett Riley, the brother of Lincoln Riley. He was TCU's offensive coordinator last year. Obviously, TCU had a great year on offense. Max Duggan was second in the Heisman voting. And they were a big play offense. They gave a lot of teams trouble. Michigan was a good team, and TCU hit them up for a lot of big plays without great quarterback play. I think that's Max Duggan did not have a great game against Michigan, and they put up 51 points. Now, granted, they had, I think, at least two defensive touchdowns there. So it's not, 51 points of offense, but they had a number of big plays. Quentin Johnson had a huge season. Their running back had a huge season. So what kind of difference do you think that Garrett Riley can have for Clemson?
I think he'd have a pretty significant difference. I think they're going to be much better on offense. I think Kate Klubnik's got a chance to be really good. I think he's probably going to take off and develop and have a good year. I don't know if he's going to be like, Heisman Trophy candidate good, but I imagine he's going to be much better than he was as a freshman. And they got a bunch of skill guys. Shipley's back. Moffa's a good back. They have talent at receiver. That has not been their problem. They have talent at receiver. I think the scheme hasn't really helped them. So I think that offense is going to be really good. I mean, it would probably be surprising to me if they weren't like a top 10 offense. Like I think they're going to be really good. Question for me is on defense for them because they're losing a ton. They had a bunch of guys declare for the draft. Some guys who were good players, but maybe a little bit underwhelming. And then, so how good are they going to be? Like, because some of the guys that are kind of still around are guys who were highly recruited, guys that kind of didn't end up being studs, that haven't been the studs that they were projected to be. And I mean, let's face it, just year one in after Venables, they weren't as good of a defense. They just weren't.
Yeah.
So where are they going to be in year two after that? Maybe it's just like, okay, here's the adjustment, but it's like, they don't have Breesy. They don't have, Murphy. They don't have KJ Henry. Like they're replacing a lot on the defensive line. Obviously, like we're going to know way more about the defense by the time we get to it. I just think that like they had a lot of guys who were really talented that they're losing. And then are they still going to be like, is Notre Dame? I would say if I was predicting today, I would say, yeah, Notre Dame's probably going to be able to run the ball on them again. So, that plays a lot into it.
What is Clemson's defense without Brent Venables, who is stealing signals? And that's honestly, like, that's a real question because
I'll tell you what, Oklahoma's defense wasn't very good this year. So
you mean Oklahoma?
Yeah, Oklahoma's defense wasn't very good.
Yeah. I think honestly, I think there's something to it. I really do. I think teams got onto it and they changed the way that they called plays against Clemson, and I think they're just like not what they were. I just think that's true.
If you're over relying on it, then I think that is.
I think they probably did. I mean, that's human nature, right? Like you have an advantage like that, and it starts to fully creep into like I'm relying on the fact that I know what to call because I know what the play is, and so I don't know. I mean, this year will be a good test for it. But.
They're still going to be super.
I mean they have enough good players.
They have a ton of talent. They have a ton of talent.
Solid.
But like, okay, so here's like a big thing for me. Like last year, Trent Simpson, they moved him from outside where he was like a star, and they moved him as inside linebacker, and he was just a guy. Like he was like not whatever. And then all of a sudden they moved him back, and then he took off at the end of the year because he was like playing in the right spot. So we took him like 9 games. So it's like do, because and they had a lot of inexperience on their coaching staff too, comparatively to where they were before. So do they kind of have, are they going to get some of the stuff figured out? I mean, it's a pretty big year for Clemson. Like, and the one thing too with Dabo, I mean, obviously he's a great recruiter. I mean, I just can't stand him as a person. I think he's a horrible dude. I don't like him at all. As a person, I think he's full of crap. But in terms of like, you know, you can't deny what they've done in terms of winning, but he's also not, he's not the guy, like he's not Lincoln Riley. It's not like, oh, this is Dabo's system. This is why, whatever. No, it's like he's brings talent. He brings coaches around them, and then they've done what they've done. And when they don't have all that in place, where are they? You know, so I don't know. It's going to be they're going to be really interesting because I mean we know the ACC isn't great, so I would say Clemson. I don't know who they're playing early in the year. Like sometimes they play like nobody, and sometimes they play like Georgia or like somebody else in the SEC who's good. So I want to see kind of like who they end up playing before Notre Dame. I haven't looked at their schedule yet, but I don't know. They're kind of the enigma. Like they could be like top 5 good. Is probably like their, you know, ceiling is they're probably going to be like top 5, like a playoff contender, or they could be probably like in top 20, but kind of hanging around only because of talent, because they're not that well coached. So we'll see.
Yeah. And then the bye, and then you finish with Wake Forest and Stanford. And those are two kind of unknowns, right? Like Wake Forest is losing Sam Hartman, their quarterback. So what are they going to do there? And then Stanford has Troy Taylor, new coach from Sacramento State, right? So what are they going to look like? That's an open question and that sort of thing. Jamie, when I look at this schedule, I think this is like a really good schedule in terms of like you can Notre Dame is, it's like if you like they ran the table in 2018, right? But it was one of those things where it's like, well, who have they beaten exactly? You know, and I don't think this schedule has that. Like if Notre Dame runs the table in 2023, it's like no brainer playoff team. Like you have, I think there's no way Ohio State is not really good. I don't think there's any way USC isn't really good. And like you said, Clemson, I think at least will be a formidable opponent, right? I would be stunned if they were not like top 15 ranked by the time.
They're not going to be bad. No way.
Yeah.
Like no way. They're not going to be like bad for them. They'll be like, you know, like 7-2 going into that game where they had a couple of close losses. But even then, it's probably more likely they're like 8-1 or 9-0 or something.
Yeah. Agree. And so because of that, this is a schedule where I know a lot of people get worried about Notre Dame making the playoff with one loss. This is definitely a one loss makes the playoff schedule, in my opinion, because you have so many prove it games, right? Like Ohio State, USC, and Clemson, like those are prove it games that you have, that if you drop one, you drop a dumb one. And especially if it's one like at Duke, like that would be, if you're going to have one loss, that would be the perfect one, honestly, because you would have the 3 big games that you win. And then you have, you know, and then Duke has a good reputation, right? They were a good team last year, and even if they weren't good, they always, and it's like early enough to where it's like still September that you would lose that game. Like Duke, Louisville, something like that, where if that's the one loss, it would be fine. I mean, what's your take on that, Jamie? Do you have a kind of overall view of, you know, Notre Dame as a one loss team making the playoff with this schedule?
I mean, I really think it all depends on who the one loss is to, I guess, because I almost think that like if you beat Ohio State and USC and Clemson, you lose one other game, they'll get in, you know, like, because I think USC, I would be surprised if they didn't at least win their division in the Pac-12, right? Like I think they will win their division. So, and Ohio State, that's the one thing you know about Ohio State, it's going to be between them and Michigan for the Big Ten again. So I mean, they're going to be, and especially at that point in the season, they're going to be undefeated. Like, I don't know who they play before, write it in stone. They're going to be undefeated at that time. So, and Clemson is going to be the best team in the ACC until someone proves otherwise. They're the best team in the ACC.
I mean, Florida State is going to have a lot of juice.
Florida State is going to have a chance, but it's like one of those things where like Florida State did have like a good finish, and they obviously have taken a ton of transfers and Jordan Travis. I really like Jordan Travis. I've always liked Jordan Travis, but how is like, I mean, I can't help but like, even though they had like a good finish this season, they didn't play well in a lot of games, so it's like, I don't know where they're at. And I still don't know if I think Mike Norvell is a really good offensive coach. I don't know if he's a good coach. Like, he's like a guy who's like totally running the program, and like their defense played like way better at the end of the year, but I still don't know how good their defense is, because it wasn't like they came in and all these guys who were high recruits turned around right away. It's like been a very slow build. And plus, when you're taking so many transfers every year, and yeah, they're good players, but it's like there is like a mercenary part of that aspect to it, where I think it's like can come back to kind of bite you. And I think like, which will be interesting with USC too, because USC took so many guys last year, and obviously like you take Caleb Williams, you take Jordan Anderson. Yeah, it worked out. Right. I mean, it totally worked out, and it might worked out really good for them. Like, I really like the Mason Cobb kid they took that from linebacker from Oklahoma State, and Anthony Lucas obviously is a guy like Notre Dame would have loved to have. Like, those guys can be really good. But like, what happens when you take, so they took like the singer kid from Arizona this year, but it's like, if they didn't take him, then they probably have a good chance of keeping like CJ Williams and Kyle Ford and some Gary of these other Bryant guys. Yeah. Right. And really, like, last year there were guys like Bynum and Rice. And I know Rice kind of ended up making plays at the end of the year, but like, he would have been the dude at somewhere else if he went somewhere else. So it's like, a lot of these guys think they're going to be the dude, and then they're not. So how does that kind of change things? Like, I don't think like Terrell Bynum was as far as I know, he wasn't like a locker room cancer or anything like that. But right. Just imagine being like, you're the number one receiver at Washington for a number of years, and then all of a sudden you're like, yeah, you're the fifth guy here. Like, yeah. And probably wasn't going to be the fifth guy until they took like two more guys after he came in the portal. Like, right. So I don't know how does that affect your program, and how's that going to affect Florida State? I know that's a total tangent from whatever, but I mean,
I do think Florida State has I think they're good, but I think that there's some NC State potential there, right? In terms of like them being we're a tier 1 program, and then, it doesn't really work out, right? Like I think that's possible, right? Like I think they had a really good year. Do they? Yeah. I think they opened with LSU.
They do again.
So we'll see.
I think that'll be Orlando or something. Yeah.
Yeah, that'll be a huge game. That'll be a huge game. So,
yeah, I just think that overall with the year, I mean, I think that Ohio State game, it sets up to be so huge because of the 4 games before it. And it's like, if Notre Dame wins that game, I mean, I could see them running the table.
You're on to something,
right? Because I think it's like one of those things. It's like kind of like a 2017 year where they lost to Georgia, but it's like they all of a sudden kind of gained more confidence because they were like, we could have beat Georgia. Like, that was like, there was a real team, and we almost beat them, and that helped them to gain confidence. I think you don't want to have like a close loss thing, but I kind of think that can help take them to another level.
They could be the Georgia team in that version. You know what I mean? Like, not on the road, but like that game. Like, I remember that was a huge win for Kirby Smart at that point.
Yes.
You're the
biggest win. Biggest win because he didn't have a good first year.
Yeah, they were 8-5.
Yeah.
They're 8-5. So they could be the Georgia version. Never know. All right, we'll leave it there. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Really good time talking about this topic. if this is your first time, again, watching on replay, hit the like, hit subscribe, hit the notification bell so you know we're going live. We'll be back next week talking more Notre Dame football. We'll get into some positions, offense and defense. We'll talk about, the roster will be finalized at that point. And so we'll start talking about the team. It's a really fun time, really good topics to talk about. So thanks again, everyone. Have a good weekend, and we will talk to you next week.